Hey, and welcome back to the lab. This is our second ever live stream. The first one didn't go too badly, so I figured I'd try this again. This one's going to be working with Lipo batteries. This is something that is, I feel, very important to mention because every time I look around, there are more and more makers that are doing portable projects, they're doing wearable projects, and they're using lipos. For the most part, I think the education is out there about the potential dangers and potential threats of lipo batteries. But I also want to talk about how you keep the lipo battery safe from you. They are a bit fickle. There are some things to always consider with them. There are things that you wouldn't expect if you are not familiar with LiPo batteries. Like any other battery, they come in many different packages. We'll talk about that today too. We'll talk about what goes wrong when you treat them badly. Both the catastrophically badly and the not properly taking care of them. We have a couple people in the live stream now. I apologize. It's 7 o'clock at night. I normally have a cup of coffee with these maker talks. If I drink coffee now, I am not going to sleep. So the coffee that I was going to have would have been I have a Kicking Horse Kick-Ass blend right now, which is a hyper caffeinated coffee. Make it in about a standard French press. Eight scoops for 8 cups of coffee. I usually do about a 7-minute brew time, and it comes out perfect. Next time, I promise I'll risk drinking the coffee, but hypercaffeinated seemed like a bad idea tonight. So, moving right along. Lipo batteries are kind of the reason that the world is the way it is. They really gave birth to portable electronics being what they are. Smartphones couldn't exist with the old style NiCad or nickel metal hydrate type batteries. They just didn't have what's called the power density, and that's how much in milliamps of power we can shove into what size package of the battery. Those of you who have ever accidentally shorted a LiPo battery know exactly how much power is inside of them, and it is scary. So one of the first things I want to talk about is various flavors of LiPos that you can have. This is, let me get to my bench here. Oh, that's kind of weird. My bench camera is not working very well. It's just displaying a static image. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm just going to go ahead and go back to the secondary monitor. Right there. Alright. And we will add in the bench monitor. Alright, I'm working with my primary monitors only. That's okay. I don't know if the stream froze or... Alright, well. There's always going to be a fluke in a live stream, huh? There's always going to be something that goes wrong. Apparently, several of my cameras are not behaving the way that they should. I'm going to give the bench camera a reboot and see if I can get it back up. Alright, so let's see if the bench is happy now. No, it's still that static image. Alright, we're dealing only with our main camera. Alright, so we have these. Some of you may recognize this. It's a laptop battery. For the most part, if you crack one of these open, with the exception of Apple batteries are definitely not built this way. You're going to find a bunch of these inside of them. This is by far one of the more common formats for lithium-ion battery. This is known as an 18650. Why is it called an 18650? Well, the 18 represents the width, the circumference going around the battery. The 65 millimeters is the length of the battery, and the last 0 is because it's round. So there's a whole lot of encoding into the terms, but 18650s are very common. They're found in a lot of devices, such as your charge packs, like this one, right, which is just your dollar store $4 battery backup pack. Right, they're often used in vaping as well. Now, one of the things about these to be aware is they're not all the same. It's very much like the old AAAs when you were growing up, where if you bought the Ever-Ready ones and you bought the Duracell ones, they were very different. For example, this one came out of one of these, and this has it's advertised to have a lot more power than it actually does. The label doesn't tell me anything. But my guess, based off of my measurements, is this is about 800 milliamps. This one, for those of you who have been with the channel for a while, you know that I vape. All right, this guy here is an 18650, and it has about 3 amp hours inside of it. Now, 3 amp hours is a lot of freaking power in this little package. This is why mech mods have kind of gone the way of the dodo bird, because if you don't understand Ohm's law, you shouldn't be using them. One of the things that is very important with Lipo batteries, if you short them, they will vent, they will explode, they will start on fire, and when lithium burns, it has an interesting trait in that it produces oxygen. So you're going to have a fire that is very hard to put out. So this is why I wanted to do this video. This is why I wanted to do this live stream and sit and talk with you guys, because there is a lot of potential to mishandle these, and if you don't understand what you're doing, you can get yourself into trouble. Now, just because I said this is the most common doesn't mean this is the only type you're going to find. There are, of course, ones that are designed for drones. Small race drones in this case. These ones here, this one is, I believe, 3-cell. Yep, 3-cell. 11.1 volts nominal. And this has 14 watt hours of energy inside of it. That is a lot of power. But it only lasts about 3 minutes in your average race drone. That's again a technology that could not have existed back in the lead acid days or nickel metal hydrate days. Then we've even got these tiny single cell ones, right? Which these ones are 205 milliamp hours, right? They're great for little portable projects. These are actually from a tiny drone, right? All the way up to the big ones. It's not in the screenshot, but those of you that have been with the channel for a while know that there's a drone hanging from the ceiling up there. This was its battery. This is a 4-cell battery. I don't know how many amp hours it is. I know that when I was changing the plug end on this, I had a momentary lapse of intelligence, and I cut through both wires with a piece of side cutters, which shorted the battery out, proceeded to weld the two leads together and give me quite a startle with quite a blue spark for some time. And that was the end of Mike doing anything for that night because I was a little frazzled. So, with what I've said about the dangers of working with lipos, how do you keep it safe? Well, the first and foremost thing that you need to do is you need to understand that you can't short these out. That is the number one directive when working with Lipo batteries. You have to build a system that can't short this battery. So that often involves working with a pre-existing type of a battery protection circuit is usually the easiest way to do that. I would not run a Lipo battery without a battery protection circuit outside of the mech mod that I use for vaping. but I definitely would be very, very careful with them. There's obviously protective sleeves for the 18650s to carry around. If you're going to carry 18650s around, carry them with a protective sleeve. Change in your pocket will make you have a bad day. All of those videos back in the day of people's pockets exploding, that's why. They had change in their pocket, they put an 18650 in, it shorted out, it vented, it started on fire, and their pocket's now on fire. So, how do we work with these? Now, interesting thing, I wish my bench cam was working. I really don't know why it's not. The interesting thing with these things is they're very easy to come by. I'm gonna try. Alan asked, could a battery protection circuit be built into the battery? Not into the battery itself, but there are several that you will find that appear to be in the 18650 format, but they're about a millimeter or two taller. And what has happened is somebody has built in a protection circuit that sits on top of the battery. They're not the easiest in the world to determine, but once you take the battery apart, you definitely start to see them. You'll see this in some consumer grade electronics that use these. As a way to make it just an interchangeable part if they ever wanted to change the technology that the battery was using, whether it be chemistry or whatever. There's a reason why they may want to change that coming up in the future, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. So, one of the big things with treating these with respect and treating these in a way that you're not going to burn your house down is using the proper chargers. There are several styles of chargers that are available, and it all depends on what style of Lipo battery and how big of a Lipo battery you're going to charge. This one, for example, is the one that I use with my drone. It is capable of charging any Lipo that I show you here. Quite easily, quite happily, with protection. It also has the ability to put it into a storage charge, which we'll touch on again later, and to completely drain the battery if you decide you want to. We have the little guy that I built for 18650 rapid charging. Just takes a USB power in, uses an IC that's designed for Lipo battery charging because there's a curve of constant current and a curve of constant voltage that need to be applied in the proper pattern for proper charging, and charges a single 18650. Again, if you're going to build something like this, be careful because again, you have exposed terminals with the voltage. Don't use this on a metal table. You're going to have a bad day. Right, they're all the way down to the little drone batteries have a little USB cord that plugs into a USB port on your computer to charge, which is kind of handy for something that tiny. So, if we're working with them in a project, we're going to need something a little less bulky than this. So that's where our friends from the dollar store come into play. Can you buy complete batteries, charger, output circuit for small electronic projects? Yeah, these. Right, we're going to take this apart in a second, and I'm going to show you what's inside of one of these. These things are a great source for ensuring that you have a protected battery and you have a protected circuit. I live in Canada. I think this was $4 at the dollar store. You can buy the circuits cheaper. Yeah, the cells in them aren't great, but you don't have to use this particular cell. I'm going to try to find a pair of pliers here. I know I have some. I know I keep threatening to clean the lab, but one of these days I'm actually going to do it, and then I'm going to be able to find even less than I can find now. Alright, so these ones just unscrew from the bottom. And out pops a battery. Right, with a circuit. Now this circuit serves two purposes that are useful. Okay, I'm not going to rip this one apart because I don't have my bench cam to show you. Give me a second. I do have one that is already out of the case. This is the battery that came from the other one that I took apart. Again, one of these years I will clean my lab. See, this is the fun stuff that I usually edit out of my videos. So, here it is. I'm going to try to get up close there for you. I wonder if my microscope will work. Let's find out. I'm just going to go ahead and create here. Just 1 second, bear with me, guys. Of course, it's not happy with life either. Alright. I'm guessing I'm having a USB power problem. Let's go back to the big camera. I apologize. I don't know what's with all the technical difficulties today. Everything worked during my test. So this is what came out of that pack. And what you're going to notice is obviously it has a USB port out because it's a charge pack. It's designed to charge devices, and a USB port in. It has the battery balancing circuits that we were talking about before, which are these two tiny little guys right here, and the inductor coil, because this does boosting. And that brings me nicely to the next point of a standard lithium-ion cell. Lithium-ion cell, when it's considered dead, is 3 to 3.2 volts. When it's considered fully charged, it's 4.2 volts, and it will spend most of its life at 3.7 volts. Now, that's per cell that's in the battery. And it's very important to talk about this because this is one of the ways that it is very different from a lead acid battery, from a nickel metal hydrate battery, from a NiCad battery. When the battery starts out, it starts out at the 4.2 volts and will very quickly drop to 3.7. And then it will stay at 3.7 for the majority of its life. And then it will very quickly drop to 3.2. Lipo batteries do not like to be over discharged. So at 3 or 3.2 volts, you have to stop pulling power from them. If they fall below 3, the cell will get damaged. This is one of the ways that I was going to talk to you about not only being safe for you, but being safe for your battery. And that's using the battery protection circuit to ensure the battery doesn't fall below that voltage and start to damage itself. Now, the other thing to remember with a LiPo battery, if you're not going to use it in a while, it doesn't like to be stored fully charged. It doesn't like to be stored fully dead. It likes about a 60% charge because they're a little bit of a princess. Anything outside of that range can start to damage the battery itself. If you look closely at this one, you'll notice that I did not do a good job of taking care of this. If you look at the other flight pack, you can see how flat the top and bottom are on that one and how puffed and soft these ones are. If you have this type of battery and it's puffed like this, don't use it. Okay, this is damaged. This has already been beyond serviceable. I'm just still trying to find a way to get rid of it. I don't know how to environmentally dispose of it up here. I probably have to take it to hazardous waste, but it's fully discharged. It's sitting here. It's dead. So this is what again. That's what happens when you over discharge or you store charged. The battery will eventually just break itself, and that's no fun. So the salvage circuits like this are important. You can buy separated battery protection circuits. There are a lot of schematics online that make it really easy using 1 or 2 ICs in order to protect the battery. Now, for most of our projects, though, you'll notice that the voltage range of 3 to 4.2 volts really isn't all that useful. We function more around 5.2 volts USB range for a lot of our microcontrollers. Well, that's where the other side of this guy comes in. Because it does spit out USB voltage, it's a step-up converter. So we trade amperage for voltage, and we get 5 volts out from lithium-ion cell, regardless of the charge, until we reach the point where it's no longer safe to drain the battery. So, the other thing to remember with this, okay, this is a 1P battery protection circuit and charge controller. So you can take many of the 18650s or any other type of lithium-ion cell and tie it together in a parallel series, and it will look like one battery. It is very important when you do this that these batteries are the exact same charge, generally were purchased at the same time, and generally were manufactured at the same time. Otherwise, you can wind up with a situation where you have sympathetic charging going on. So, if this one is a little more charged than this one, and you wire them positive to positive, negative to negative, this one's going to start to charge this one. And while that sounds okay, when you get 4 batteries, they start chasing a charge together, and you wind up with an uncontrolled situation, and that can be dangerous. At the very least, you're going to severely reduce the life of your battery. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, the other thing that I definitely wanted to talk about today, is Lipo batteries are not forever. And this is kind of an intro into why some manufacturers have gone the way, very much like the laptop batteries, where they've created a separate form factor that they could easily replace with another technology. As a Lipo battery gets older, if you think of a battery with your anode, your cathode, and your electrolyte in the middle, as you charge and discharge and charge and discharge and charge and discharge a lithium-ion battery, dendrites start to form, and they start to make their way through the electrolyte, and eventually, many years from now, but eventually, especially if not controlled through a proper battery protection circuit, will touch. And these dendrites are capable of conducting electricity. So what you have in that respect is an immediate internal short circuit of the battery. And like we said at the beginning of the live stream, short-circuiting a lithium-ion battery, you're going to have a bad day. So a lot of manufacturers, a lot of research projects, a lot of money is being invested into finding what is being called a glass or solid state battery. If you're interested, Google it. There's a lot of research going on right now. I really kind of wanted to get my hands on some of them. There's a couple of thin batteries that are lithium-based batteries that you can cut with scissors, and they just keep working, which is absolutely incredible to me. But we need to find something that doesn't grow those dendrites, that doesn't internally short, and doesn't die that way. And the number of cycles that a lithium-ion battery is going to get is going to depend on 3 things primarily. How well the battery was made, its chemistry, did the factory actually care? How well the charging has been on the battery. Was it let to drop below 3 volts? Was it charged above 4.2 volts? The number of cycles is really irrelevant if you've taken proper precautions and taken care of it. But the third one is how you store the battery. As I said, they like about a 60% charge when they're not going to be used for a long period of time. So if you're a drone racer like I used to be, when you got back, if you had any of these left that were charged first, that's horrible. You should have spent every battery you had out in that field, and I have no idea why you're coming back with a charged battery. But at the end of the season, you would put these into a storage charge. And your LiPo charger actually has a mode called storage charge, which will put these to about a 60% charge and keep them nice and healthy for you. It is common in the drone racing field and the fields that use these big batteries for RC cars, for drone racing, for boats, to have the opinion that these should be charged in a safe, fireproof container. I can't agree more. There has been a few drone pilots that have lost their entire house because they were charging batteries that were damaged and they didn't know it was damaged, and it started on fire and it burned the house down. it's not a good thing to talk about. As you can tell by the change in my voice, I'm not overly comfortable with it. I'm looking for what I used to use to charge these in, and I don't know if it's near me. Again, I keep threatening to clean the lab. I think it is actually in the closet, and what it is it's an old metal ammo crate that I used to charge these in. But I've known some people that they would use the fireplace. They would charge this directly in their fireplace. That way, if a fire started, well, that's kind of where a fire is supposed to be, so we're good. With the little batteries, it's a lot less to worry about. The reason the drone batteries are a much bigger threat is the power density in this, the amount of power that's in this versus the amount of power that's in this. It's kind of like a match head versus a grenade, right? So these I wouldn't have a problem charging on top of my computer. The chances of them exploding are very slim. They'll get puffy before they explode, and you'll know that something's wrong. I have never seen one of these explode when it wasn't intentionally abused. If you want to watch a lithium battery explosion, by all means, search for that on YouTube. It's a fun watch. There's a lot of videos from drone pilots when they feel their batteries are near death. They'll take a big stick with a metal, obviously metal, with a nail on the end and smash it through them and watch them explode. And of course, because you're a drone pilot, you're going to film that. So that's what they went ahead and did. And there's a lot of videos on what happens when you mistreat a Lipo battery. But I must admit, maybe I'm repeating myself a little bit here. Lipo batteries have changed the face of electronics. They've changed the face of consumer electronics. We've seen in the consumer world what happens when they go wrong. The Samsung Galaxy that was exploding forever. It wasn't necessarily the battery that was the problem, but some engineer went with a very cheap charge controller. And it would overheat the batteries while it was charging them. It would draw way too much current and try to shove way too much current into the battery. And on paper, I'm sure the part looked perfect, and it saved them half a cent a phone. So they switched from what the experienced engineer told them to use and went with what the new kid told them to use because, again, it's half a cent a phone savings. And phones started to explode. So yeah, it's not just the DIY market that has issues with safety sometimes. It got to the point where those phones weren't even allowed on planes because, again, they're going to explode. Oh, that's another important safety tip and important piece of information. If you are going on a plane with lithium ion, lithium polymer, or lithium iron batteries, if it's in a device, that's fine. If it isn't in a device, it needs to be in your carry-on. It needs to stay with you. Now, the reason for this, some people might say, well, we don't want an uncontrollable fire in the cabin. We don't want an uncontrollable fire that we don't know about in the belly of the plane, right? So FAA, the Canadian Aviation Authority as well, have deemed that they should come into the cabin with you and be on your person in your carry-on, just to try and save you some heartache of what's going on later. Now, following up on 50 Hertz comment with the salvaged part here, one of the things I would do, and I would show you how if I had a bench camera, or if I had any of the other angles actually working for me, I like to take off the USB out and then just solder two wires to the outside two terminals for minus and positive, and then get 5 volts out that way. Obviously, there's the two battery prongs here where you would solder the battery plus and battery minus of either the pack that's in parallel or the single cell itself. And then they nicely heat shrink all of that together in the actual package of what's inside of the battery. Now, this is not the cheapest way to get the charge circuit and the protection circuit and the battery. It is, in my country, the most convenient way because I don't want to have to order parts from China. I don't want to have to spin up my own board in Oh my god, I totally forgot the name of the PCB layout program I'm using. Anyway, I don't want to have to spin up my own circuit. I don't want to have to spin up my own board. I just kind of want it to work right away and save me a whole bunch of time. So I tend to use these. I will use these with single cell batteries like this as well, knowing that it won't keep a charge as long. But sometimes in the enclosures of what I'm building, this fits a lot better than this. Just give me 1 second here, guys. Just making sure I'm not missing anything in the comments that are going on here. Apparently not. No, Alan, it's not Eagle that I use. I used to use Eagle. Let's see, it's installed here. I'll look it up. Eagle became a product of Altium, I believe. Or was it Autodesk? It was bought by a big company, and it's no longer the free software that it used to be. It used to be beautiful software. Alright, so 50 Hertz asks, can you recommend a convenient solution for measuring how much power a USB project consumes? Yeah, there's several that'll work quite well for that. My personal favorite that I use all of the time. Oh, Alan, it's Easy EDA. That's the layout software I use. My personal favorite way to tell how much power something's drawing right off the bat is to use my lab bench power supply. Set it to 5.2 volts, let it run, and see what the amp draw is out of it. Now, I know that that's not the most convenient way for some people. There are USB inline monitors that will give you a display of how much current is being drawn from the USB port. Those are very useful for testing the draw of a USB device that you didn't build. All right. You can, of course, still do that with a lab bench power supply, but you're going to have trouble getting the data through to the computer. So if it's something you need to use, then that's a good way to go about doing that. Is they're usually a couple dollars on eBay or on Banggood, or I'll find some and I'll drop a link in the description down below once this live stream is over. Mitch says that Autodesk, but Fusion 360 does PCB layout now too. That seems weird. I'm not gonna lie. I used to use Fusion 360 for 3D modeling. I was never very good with it. But when Autodesk announced that it will no longer be free, I jumped ship right away. For 3D modeling, for enclosures, for 3D printing, my personal favorite right now is FreeCAD. Right? It is a very simplistic parametric modeling piece of software. It is, by its very name, it's free. It's always going to be free. Autodesk still gives out free educational licenses that anybody could use, but I don't want to fight with a possible situation where something that I've invested a lot of time, where I've invested a lot of my own energy into developing a product that, let's say, does go commercial. Now I have to worry about how do I get legit with this software, and does it matter that I wasn't when I built it? And there can be all kinds of intellectual property issues that go on, and I don't want to deal with that. I just want to build cool stuff, and I don't want to have to sit back and think, is there a problem? On an unrelated to Lipo note, this is why I pay for the Adobe Creative Suite. A lot of people are just like, well, you can pirate it. Well, sure, I can pirate it. I've got 70 some odd videos up here now, including this being the second live stream. I don't want to have a legal issue about whether or not these videos are legal, or whether the intellectual property is valid, whether anything I say on here can be usurped from Adobe because I'm pirated a piece of software. So I bit the bullet right away and I paid for it. I recommend that you either work with a program that is known to be free at the time that you're working with it, and hopefully will stay that way for a while, or you purchase a piece of software that you know will maintain that you have a license. So if you do come up with an idea that is awesome, and I hope you do, and I hope you share it with the rest of the world, that you can profit from it, and no strange lawyer and patent troll is going to mess with you. The other device I believe I have down here that I just thought of is very handy for Lipo batteries. Now, this again comes primarily from the drone racing world. This is a battery monitor, and if I take the Lipo battery, and I always get this wrong, positive on that side, okay. Nope. Nope. Tells me, first off, it beeps really loudly, which is just enough to scare every small animal in your house. It tells you, we're going to watch it go through this. The first cell is at 3.95 volts, second cell is at 4.09 volts, third cell is at 4.17 volts, all of them together are 12.2 volts, which means that this pack is not very well balanced. And that led perfectly, I couldn't have done that better. That leads perfectly into my next topic that I wanted to discuss with multi-cell packs. Now, this particular side of the multi-cell pack applies to multiple serial cells, or multiple cells in series. So obviously parallel gives you more battery life, series gives you more voltage. When multiple cells are in series, it's very important that they remain balanced, so that they have the same voltage across each individual cell. It is important to the point that most of them come with a wire like this, right? And as you can see, there's 4 wires coming out of this. This is a 3-cell battery, so 3 voltage levels and a ground. When you plug it into a charger like this, which is designed to charge multi-series batteries, you'll notice on the side that there is a whole bunch of these white connectors. I really wish I had more cameras. I don't. Right here. And this allows this charger to tell what voltage each cell is at. So what it's going to do is this is going to charge the battery pack as a whole first until one of the cells reaches 4.2 volts. Then it's going to start to discharge that one cell until that cell reaches 4.1 while continuing to charge the entire pack. And that will hopefully start to bring the other cells up to the 4.2 volts. And as each cell makes it to 4.2 volts and there's still one that isn't, it discharges both of them and continues to charge the entire pack, thereby making the cells perfectly balanced. That is very important in a series application. So if you are going to make a battery pack out of 2 of these, for example, in series, right, what you want is you want a wire coming off of here for your full voltage, a wire coming off of this joint over here for your half voltage, and your ground coming off of over here. And any battery protection circuit that's designed for series style packs should have 3 pads on it for the battery for you to solder, so it can do the balance charging and it can monitor it. I have seen some of the cheap Chinese knockoffs of these protection circuits and charging circuits where it didn't have that, which seems like a really big oversight from my point of view. It is such an easy win and such a necessary thing with these batteries that I just don't know why it wasn't included. So, yeah. All right. I was thinking for a second that I might know why the cameras aren't working, but I don't have. I'm wrong. All right. Give me one quick second. Hey, what do you know? I have a bench camera. Yay! I don't know why that's suddenly working. Let me move some stuff around here, and we will take a better look at some of this stuff now that I can. You go back here. You go up here. Sorry about the clunkiness of that part, but we're back in the world with a bench camera. That's kind of neat. So at this point, as I was saying, we have. Ooh, I almost looked dead there for a second. I promise I'm not. So at this point, we have a bench camera. It's easier for me to point some of the stuff out that we're talking about, and for you to get a size scale reference for some of what is going on. A lot of this seems very basic, and for a lot of makers and for a lot of people in the RC world, this is going to be a well-duh video. I openly admit this is a basic video. This is essentially a maker basics, but it's one of those topics where people just don't think about it, and you need to. I'll give you another example. One of the places that most people would not think of a Lipo battery. My action cameras. 2-cell Lipo battery. You can tell by the 3 contacts. It is interesting, and one of the ways that I look at the quality of a device when I am evaluating or reviewing something is I will put this battery pack in. I will turn the camera on. And I will discharge the battery to the point that the camera says the battery is dead. Now, I can't do that now because that'll take hours with this camera. But then what I do is, once the camera shuts off because it believes the battery is dead, I take the battery out, I grab my multimeter, and I check the voltage so that I can see how far down, once I throw batteries around that I'm talking about protecting, so I can see how far down the charge is gone. Then I'll plug it back into the USB, I'll let it fully charge the battery, I'll pull the battery out, and I'll check to see what level it charges the battery to. I don't know if you remember the cheap Chinese action cameras that I reviewed that were absolutely horrible. When I did this with them, those batteries were being brought down to 2.8 volts per cell. So on top of the camera being the worst quality camera I've ever seen in my life, with the build quality that was an absolute laughable joke, if you did go out of your way to purchase decent batteries for the camera, it's going to eat them up inside of a couple of cycles because it's allowing them to discharge too far unless you actively protect them. So beware of cheap products. Beware of how the cheap products are going to handle their batteries together. It's a good marker. It's a good indicator of how much the engineers who built something cared. There is another type of battery that my buddy Dan had given me some of. I believe they're called 18500s. It's essentially an 18650. Only it's about that big. Now, there is a gentleman named Andreas. He runs a YouTube channel, and he introduces himself as the guy with the Swiss accent. This man is very brilliant. I will tag his channel down below once this live stream is over. He says that you can run microcontrollers off of these. Here's the interesting thing I found with them. If you use the specialty charger that's designed for them, yes, they seem to charge at different voltage levels. And as Dan says, LiFePO, which is lithium iron polymer, which is the chemistry that's inside the battery. As an experiment, I threw one into my standard 18650 charger just to see what would happen, and it charges to 4.2 volts. And its discharge cycle is very similar to one of these, right? Except that it doesn't last anywhere near as long as one of these. Right, and then I turned around and I used the charging profile that the datasheet for them recommended using my lab bench power supply, because unlike Dan, I'm not cool enough to have a proper charger for these things. And I was able to charge it to that and discharge it to the 3 volt level range, and it seemed perfectly happy. I did connect it to an ESP82, or I'm sorry, an ESP32 camera module. And it did seem to power the module straight from the battery with no regulator. I don't know if I like that, right? And the reason that I don't know if I like that is the over discharge possibility. So while it is very attractive to not need a circuit to manage the battery, and while it is very attractive to be able to plug a battery directly into a microcontroller that's expecting the 3.3 volt to 4 volt range to function, you do have a downside. As my father-in-law is very famous of saying, or not very famous for saying, but very often says, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So for every upside, there's a downside. And if you're going to use these batteries because you get to just easily plug them into your microcontroller, I don't know what happens with the over discharge. I'm assuming that even if the microcontroller is not being powered enough to run, that it is still drawing voltage and it's still drawing current from the battery, and over time it will die. Dan says that the ESP32 lets you read the input voltage. Yes, I guarantee. I agree, it does, but it doesn't let you turn it off. So you can read the input voltage and you can watch that battery die, but you really have no way to turn off the load unless you build some type of battery protection or management circuit, which is kind of what you were trying to avoid. So you could theoretically use the ESP32 to read the level of voltage that's there, and then use that to trigger a MOSFET to be able to shut that off. But a MOSFET's not going to work either. You're going to need something that is normally open and powered closed, and you're going to have to hold that closed in order to maintain power for the device. Yes, and Dan is absolutely correct. Power regulators take up to 20% of the power. The efficiency of the regulator varies wildly based on the regulator that you use. Linear regulators versus switching regulators have very different efficiencies to them, so there is definitely that to consider as well. Don't get me wrong. Dan, I completely understand what you're saying, and I completely understand the desire to plug a battery directly into a microcontroller. And for some of the projects that you have spoken of in the past and that I'm aware of, because of the nature of the project, that's fun. Right, the idea being the let it go and it does its thing, and when it's dead, it's dead. That's fine. The rechargeable things you're probably going to have to be a little more protective of. And yes, if you could read the voltage with the ESP32, you can always start to put the processor to sleep. You can always start to go into power saving mode. But you're never going to be able to completely stop the trickle to the processor. Now, I might be arguing semantics here, because by the time you put the ESP32 into the deepest sleep mode that it has, it might take 10 years to bring a battery down the 0.5 volts it's going to need to damage it. So I might be arguing semantics. But it's just one of those things that for me, I'm going to stick to a regulator. I understand that they take up to 20% of the power. Boost converters are probably more than 20%. But for the projects that we've done in the lab, that's fine. Most of what I do, to be honest, gets plugged into a wall anyway. Okay. Yeah. So, where did I want to go from there? Yeah, the other piece of information. When you come across devices that obviously use Lipo batteries in a battery pack format, whether it be like this guy, whether it be, if you've been with the channel for a while, you recognize these. These are the old studio lights that I had. They take a 2-cell lithium-ion battery to go in here. If you're going to apply wall power to these, if you're going to do a hack to put wall power in, please do the math. Alright, so remember, Lipo batteries, single cell, 3 volts dead, 3.7 volts nominal, 4.2 volts fully charged. So when I do power modifications for lights like these, right, to be a wall current thing, and I go and I do my research and I find people that are using 12 volt wall adapters to replace 2-cell Lipo batteries, I get a little nervous. At that point, you definitely want 8.4 volts, and the way that I got that, because 12 volt wall warts are much more common than 8.4 ones, is just use the linear regulator. I'm sure Dan is cringing right now at the amount of energy that I'm wasting through one of the cheap Chinese regulators that I've used in the past for those, but it's safer for the lights. So all in all, I don't know if there's a whole lot more off the top of my head that I wanted to talk about when it comes to the batteries and lithium ion and how to stay safe around them and how to keep them safe from you, and how to keep them safe until when a crappy engineer got their hands on it. I think that was pretty much everything. I don't know if there's any other questions coming in through the live stream. If anybody's watching that has any additional questions, by all means, pop them into the live chat down there. I'm going to stick around for a little bit. I promise the next time that we do this, I'm going to have all my cameras up and running, and it won't be let's stare at Mike's head for an hour from one thing, and then halfway through I can manage to get my other camera back. I was a little bit disappointed with that. So, it doesn't look like I'm getting any more questions in the comments. So, as I've said many, many times, thank you for joining me in the lab. I hope you learned something today. And we will speak again soon.